Always has been, always will be. Hot topic in agriculture. Should you buy land? Is it a good investment? Here's a little segment on that. Enjoy.
My question was, where is the best place to spend your money and have the greatest ROI? Sam here, who's a great guy, a great follow, says tile, grain storage, and ground. The first two are kind of simple to me, but ground is a tough one for me. The biggest kicker is, do you ever plan to sell that ground? If you can assume the value of it being sold at some point, then I think it makes sense. If you want to play the long game, the unselfish game, and say, I will never sell this, it sure doesn't pencil out well. I just heard someone $13,000 an acre nearby, a few miles from us, up for sale. $13,000 an acre. If you're never selling that and you're asking for a mere 5% return, that's not a big number. That's less than what the stock market's going to get you. If you want a 5% return, that's $650 an acre annually to get a 5% return. And that's assuming you pay cash for it and there's no loan involved in the interest that is tied in with that. Ground, $13,000 an acre. How does that pencil? And I know what you guys are going to say. You're going to say it doesn't pencil, but it's never penciled. But if you aren't realizing that value of a sale in your lifetime, to me, it's a pretty easy decision to not buy ground. But that's a great way to never grow. Also, I've got parents who have bought a ton of acres that I'm very grateful for. I will realize the value of it, but they won't while they're paying on it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. It takes a long time to kind of be in the green on that. Ground's a tough one. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you think? And do you factor in the selling value of it when you buy it? Because my guess is very few people do. Let me know your thoughts. Copy that. Over.
I guess what I was getting at here is, if you are looking at the ROI on buying land and you aren't realizing the appreciation in the land itself, which Google here is telling me might be 7% annually over the last 20 years. Who knows if that continues up or down. But if you aren't realizing that 7%, if you aren't planning to sell it, then your only ROI is the crop that you pull off of it. And you aren't going to have a 5% return on investment on $13,000 an acre. And I'm not claiming that $13,000 an acre is a big number either, because I look at all these sales around us. The numbers go higher than that. 13,000 is probably very reasonable. But how do you pencil that out? Yes, if you want to factor in that the land appreciates at 7% annually, then it becomes a good investment because you then have the also ROI from your crop each year. But if you aren't realizing that land appreciation because it's not a plan to sell, then pencil. That's all I'm saying. Copy that. Over. Let's look at some math now, comparing the investment of buying ground versus the common investment, which is the stock market, and I'm using the S&P 500. To start this conversation, we've got to know what appreciation has been observed. This is apples to apples comparison. I believe this was Iowa State University's math. In 1985, they had tillable land in Iowa valued at about $1,100. In 2025, they've got it about $10,000. That is an 800% return over those 40 years. Annually, when you factor in compounding appreciation, that's about 5.5% annually. And I know what you guys are going to say. You're going to say farm ground, tillable farm ground in Iowa is not worth $10,000. It might be much closer to twice that. But this is the only way I can use to say apples to apples. My argument would be, well, maybe in 1985 it wasn't $1,100. Maybe that starting point wasn't fair. Maybe at that time it was $2,000. I don't know. All I know is I've used apples to apples, same source, using their numbers. Meanwhile, this is the S&P 500. $100 spent in 1985 equates to about $9,000 in 2025. That's a 9,000% return compounded annually. That's 12% annually. So then we go back to the original question at hand. Buying an acre of ground, $13,000. What does that pay you in 40 more years? In 40 more years, that kind of extends my lifetime or at least my ownership. Track that. 40 years all the way down. In 2064, that land value appreciating at 5.6% annually compounds down $110,000. That's the value of that 1 acre. If I put that same $13,000 in at a 12% return, 11.89, it becomes $1 million after 40 years. So then one other factor here is you also have to include what you can make off of that acre each year while you still own it and appreciate the value of it. I've got $300 an acre moderate cash rent times 40 years. That's only $12,000. 1 acre, 40 years, $12,000. So you can add that 12,000 on to the 110,000 that the land is now worth, that 1 acre is now worth. But that number is not close to $1 million. So there's a lot of factors here that aren't included, such as maybe the dividends on your stock investment, maybe different returns on the farm ground. Could be greater than 300 a year, could be less than 300 a year. There could be different income off of that farm ground, green energy, what have you, whatever it may be. The annual return on the farm ground could be up or down. That includes both the crop and the actual value of the land. But the same can be said about the stock market. That value could be higher, that value could be lower, but I'm using a 40-year average here. That's a pretty good sample size. So again, I'm not saying the farm ground is a bad investment. I'm just saying in comparison to the standard investment that is the stock market, why would you buy farm ground? And I mentioned in the other video, my parents have bought a lot of farm ground, and I will be able to appreciate it much more than them because at some point it will be paid off and I'll have it for free. So that's easy for me. But there's an argument that had they not bought that farm ground and put that same money into the stock market, I would be better off. And I mean, there's a million factors that goes into this, such as when you're buying land and you're farming, you have flexibility, you get to take vacations, different things like that. Everything is on your schedule. You get to work with your kids, which you can't put a number, a value, a dollar amount on that. There's a pride in it. People have brought up the equity of owning farm ground and what that equity can do for you. I don't know what the right answer is here, talking about these two options of spending your money. All I know is on paper, with a calculator, pen and paper, it makes a hell of a lot more sense to not buy the ground and rather put that money into the stock market. That's all I'm saying.